Good morning, everyone. Welcome to PyCon Sweden 2021. Today is October 21, the first day of our conference, and we are in the software track. This track will be moderated interchangeably by me and Erasmus. And today we will have 6 talks. Our first talk is called Advanced Flask, Recipes for an All-Weather Craft. And this talk will be given by Abdur-Rahmaan Janhangeer from Mauritius, which is a small island in the Indian Ocean. Abdur-Rahmaan, good morning.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me today. Okay,
let me quickly introduce you. Abdur-Rahmaan is an independent software developer. He's a Python programmer with a liking for Flask. He's an organizing member of FlaskCon, Flask Community Work Group, and Python Mauritius User Group.
Yes, thank you very much.
So, dear Abdur-Rahmaan, now the stage is yours. Please begin.
Okay, let's begin. Our talk today is about Flask, to build your Flask application in such a way that you can deal with pretty much common scenarios that arise due to Flask usage. Okay, so welcome to PyCon Sweden 2021. Okay, so this is our user group. I mean, in Mauritius, so you can check it out later. And I've already been introduced, but here are some links, like just in case you want to check me out. And yes, we can begin. Well, let's start like with a typical Flask story. Like it begins with someone having an idea for a project, so he selects Flask, which is great, and then he adds in features, adds in whatever he wants. He codes. Okay, so he deploys. Okay, the app is working great, which is nice. So now he wants to refine his deployment, which is sometimes the moment where some issues just crop in. Okay, and of course the testing environment and the production environment are different. So if you've used only Flask bare bones, like without any best practices, without anything, so normally that's when things can get out of hand. And the solution is to use configuration profiles so that you can configure your app for testing. You can configure your app for development. You can configure your app for production. So if you are not using configuration profiles, so you'll be using the same profiles everywhere, which is kind of not a very bad idea, in fact. So, and it is at this point that you'd also consider adding the application factory pattern, because this allows you to better switch between profiles. So this is a good moment to put in the application factory pattern. And normally you will see that when you write your app, so things are just you've just added a new feature, and then you see that that feature broke the entire app. So you'd like to keep your Flask app very simple, but unfortunately you find yourself in a situation that you need to write tests. So okay, so to that simple app of yours, now you have to write tests. Okay, and then after some times you see that actually your code is not quite right. Okay, you've just coded not very thoughtfully, and now your code base is a bit all over the place. So you need an organized way to set up your app. You need to refactor your app. So okay, so you've done it. Now you think that it's great, but Now, if you've used, for example, unit testing, the normal unit testing framework, or you've done your testing very simplistic, or you just coded whatever came up first in a Google search, so you'd find that your tests are actually very boring. And what you'd want to do is to automate fixtures, automate your tests, to at least have reusable pieces of code that you can reuse, that you can use everywhere in your tests. So you'll be writing fixtures, etc. So you don't want that, but at some point you have to, you face that situation. Okay, project one is finished, but now you're going to tackle another Flask project. Okay, but unfortunately you have to do all those again. So you think, that's when you realize that I really need a template. I really need something to help me have from the beginning a very nice structure with amazing, so some cool features from the start. So that's when you realize, oh, I have to have a template somewhere. Okay, and I realized that well, I have to use APIs. So maybe you want to dig around for some API framework and then integrate it to your setup. Okay, so you've started simple, but over time you see that there are some more things that you need to take care of if you are using Flask. So now, for example, you want to integrate yet another thing, for example, celery, and then you're scratching your head. Okay, I have this setup, and then I'm integrating something like celery. I'm getting some more errors. So what I what I have to do, and then you realize that whatever all those work you did, okay, and someone new has to work on your project, but then you don't have some documentation about the project itself, not necessarily about Flask, but about the project you are tackling. Maybe you integrated some third-party APIs, some words about that third-party service, or even the way, maybe if you wrote a custom extension, you'd want to document that, etc. So that's why you also need docs at some point, because as long as it's you, it's great. You and the person who wrote the app is still great, but as soon as someone new drops in, so that person is lost. So he has to go over the code. So even if he's knows the Flask 100%, but whatever you wrote, he needs to have some context about it. So you also, documentation is also useful to have in a Flask project. But that's why, especially for Flask, I'm not saying it's for other frameworks, but at least for Flask, you need something. You need to have an app that in every situation in every situation that you see yourself in, so you can use that base that you have. You can use that basic app in every situation, because all the situations that we covered, so these are pretty common. And if you just you started with a simple structure, maybe this is not this will not fit in all these situations. So over the time, you'd see yourself refactoring your app. So you need to plan something with as much foresight as you can. And one, of course, is adding the application factory. Like, this is something very, very fundamental in Flask development, which people, or anybody who just pick up Flask won't realize until sometimes later. And it's really very simple. That's it. But normally you'd want to couple it with your configuration profiles. So, but basically this is what we mean by the application factory. And of course, having different configuration. There are many ways, but something I like is to inherit the different profiles from a basic configuration object. Okay, so it's something like that, adding it with application factory, so you get something like that. And then for tests, I can highly recommend PyTest, because PyTest, you don't have to import your code in one place for your test to run. You can have your tests in different folders, just to make sure to have your test files prefixed with test. So from one place, PyTest will automatically search for all the files, and then yes, you can run your test, which is, I mean, don't go basic unit test, which is included with Python, but go for PyTest, which I know it's not that nice to recommend something specific, but I think PyTest is worth it. And also to have docs from the start, like Sphinx, because then you can document things along the way, because the documentation is already here. And also about you also need to think of a great setup to just iron out circular import errors. So it's better you have your, the problem is that normally if you use a single file Flask app, you define your extension objects all in that file. Okay, now if you have a blueprint, you'd be importing from app.py, maybe importing SQL Alchemy, importing DB, importing mail from app.py. That's when you run into circular errors. But it's better to have a separate file for initializations, okay, maybe called init.py, and then you define whatever you want the extension objects in here. So, and in app.py, so I just missed the indentation. So in app.py, so you just from init import mail here, from init import mail, and then from other places, so you just import from, you want to use mail, you want to use any other configuration, like variable, extension variable like mail. So just from init import. So from app.py, you import from init, from other files, you import from init. This reduces, well, circular import errors. And the best way I found to organize your code base is to group everything in modules. Okay, so maybe this seems odd in a Flask project to have modules, but at some point, if you really want organization, if you have a very big project, so organizing steps into modules is really something you should maybe consider. And then you can do it like that. App.py, you have module 1, module 2, module 3, but normally I prefer to have everything in a modules folder, so that if I have some more folders that I need, so I can differentiate between what are modules, what folders are modules, and what folders are not modules. So by grouping everything in a modules folder. Okay. And then in your modules folder, to have your templates, static, tests, models, form, view, etc., as much file as you need, but group into module. And yes, so that's it. Use the Flask command. Okay, so by using uh, app.cli command, which is just implementing, which is just using click behind the scene. So maybe you have different options to have command line options in your Flask app. You can have maybe sys.argv, which is a very bad idea, or you can even implement click, okay, from scratch, which is great, but doesn't necessarily play well with your app. But having Flask something, so it's a nice way to implement command line configurations. And also one thing I think it's very needed is to automate blueprint registration, because normally when you have modules, you still have to write blueprint in one place, maybe in view.py, and then in your app.py to import, for example, from module name view.py, you import the blueprint, and then you register the blueprint. But maybe you can have something like that to automate the blueprint, just to go over in all folders in your modules folder, and then just to be sure to have a convention for your blueprint, for naming your blueprint variable, maybe by having it having the same name as the folder the module is in. But automating the blueprint is in Flask actually makes life very easy, because not writing that piece of code in app.py again saves a lot of time and allows you to have a fluid workflow, and actually to forget about blueprints. Because okay, and also, for example, here we saw that for example, if we are having our module name having the same prefix as the folder the module is in, so we'd want not to accidentally misspell the blueprint variable. So that's when maybe automating your module creation is might be a nice idea. So okay, that is some code. Maybe you'd want to by some command, when you issue some command, so it will create a folder in the modules folder. It will create some files in it, some empty files. So automating the module creation is a nice idea. And also, maybe if you are using forms, to use WT Forms Alchemy, because you just actually specify a model, and then your form will be populated. You don't have to rewrite form codes. Like it keeps it to a minimum. So WT Forms Alchemy is really something nice. Okay, and now for asset serving, if ever you are using modules, you want your assets to be in your module. So you'd want to write some code that collects the assets in all modules static folder, and then aggregate all of them in the static folder, so that on your server, on the app serving your app, like Nginx or Apache, you can just alias /static to a physical location. So that's what okay, no, normally in production you'll be serving from the static folder, but for development, etc., or even for modules writing, so you'd want to keep, like we said, everything in the module, your static folder in your module. It just implementing some piece of code that just collects all files from each module, and then put it into the static folder. That's basically it. And then to write some code that in development serves from one place, because in development it will serve from the modules static folder, but in production it will serve from /static something. So you just write a convention to migrate between the two, and well, a custom function that detects when the app is running in production, when it's not running in production, because the Flask by default has three modes: testing, development, production. That Flask is aware of those modes, so you can detect them. But this is a concrete idea that I've been using to have modules in Flask and implement the collect static fully. Now, considering that base that we have, so what about if you want to implement Celery? Well, normally Celery needs an app of its own, so you have the Celery app in Celery app.py, and then maybe in your module you can have a file called task.py for your tasks. So in init.py, just like we said, like uh, every extension objects, we define it in init.py. So for celery, it's the same. And then in app.py, to do something like that, to have our create app, but also to have our init celery function. And then in the celery app, we just do something like that. It's just something to show that the setup that we've been proposing, if you want to add more something that's completely different, that doesn't fit in the workflow, but it's intuitive enough for someone to just integrate, for example, celery. And then, for example, for intels.py in your module, so you just import celery from init, so you won't get errors. Now let's say we want to introduce something like Flask RESTX. So uh, okay, for APIs. So again, adding maybe something like API util.py, and then in init.py to define, just like any other extension, Flask RESTX, and then to have one single function to just add the namespaces or whatever. And then uh, here in app.py, you do it like other extensions, but it's just showing that having a nice structure, whatever extension comes, even it looks very weird, but you can integrate it in that setup that we are proposing. And then for migrations also, if you want to flash migrate to detect your models like without fail, the best way is to always import all your models in app.py, so that Flask migrate will always like uh, have it, but of course with caution. But if you want to Flask migrate to always auto detect everything that your models, so just auto import them, and then in using a module structure ensures that your models will always be in models.py in that module, so you can always know where to find the models. And also, if you want to, for example, have modular migrations, well, you'll have to make Flask Alembic load only the models in that uh, modules models.py. So this and then if you want to reuse your base, you have a base with some basic setup, you want to reuse your base, so use cookie cutter. It's better than writing Python code to do it. So just have a maybe in a Git repository somewhere, and then you can use cookie cutter to just clone the app and then fill in the details. Okay, so all whatever we've been proposing. So this is some the background thinking in that framework that I've been building. So these are the ideas which is ongoing, like ways to better manage your Flask project. But this presentation gives the different mechanism how we implemented and the why behind. And if ever this presentation you've like it, or it helped you somehow, something like that, so feel free to just drop me a email. Yes. So
Thank you very much for your nice talk.
do you have some questions upcoming?
Let's see. So far, we have no questions. Let's wait a little bit. We still
Okay.
have 5 minutes.
Okay, so in the meantime, so I just if I can just share my whole screen.
Yes, please.
So I like to just or maybe share another type, which I like to share why invest in such a setup, like why have an advanced Flask setup. Okay, so can you see my screen here?
We see your Twitter.
Okay, yes, that's great. Yes, so this was a question that someone somewhere posted to this person here. who is the first Pinterest employee. So he was asking like he was intrigued by something called heavily modified Django. So what is that? Why is Pinterest like using some heavily modified Django? So then that person was the first employee. So he said that they were using Django because at first, so he was using Django like because he knew it. So they were using Django. So when you hit a certain scale, you file the framework because Django is opinionated. Okay, so you have to if you want to have your own way. So it's to some degree it's not possible. Okay, and what they did, they fork Django. They built a custom. Modified Django. They were using it because they wanted to have their own way. Okay, and then they move off it. They move off their fork because obviously it was going to become, I don't know, because Django implemented their own ORM. Django implemented like everything. They are maintaining pretty much their own everything. So maybe you have 5 people to maintain your fork. Django team has many people, so obviously it's not going to work that well. And then what did they move to? So they built a homegrown framework on top of Flask. Okay, so they wanted a framework. They wanted to have a something simple, and in that what we proposed in that talk is to modify Flask to have a highly modular structure with this and everything, and to even if your code base grows as big as you like, but you retain control all while using Flask like bare bones. If you want to use any Flask extension, you can use, like, you don't have to trade frameworks just for organization. Like you can still customize pretty much anything you want, but those were just some tips like to better manage Flask when you have really big code bases. And I think it's worth it because one of the joy of programming is when you code, but you also have you enjoy it. You enjoy coding. Flask gives you that. You enjoy, like, you do it your way. You enjoy whatever you are doing. You remain straight to the point. And I can say that what I proposed is you had frameworks, for example, like Flask Diamond, etc., which gave you a modules advantages, but you had to learn Flask Diamond. But in that talk, what we proposed are things that everybody can understand, anybody can implement, doesn't need any prior knowledge. You just like need to know Python, and I think it's worth it even if you go for the moon. So this structure
We,
is
we,
kind
we
of
have one
worth it.
question. We have one question from Alexander Hultnier. He asks, you talk about Flask RESTix. Last time I used that extension, it used an older Open API spec. Is this still the case, and can this be worked around easily? What is your opinion?
Well, I talk about the maintenance of Flask RESTx. There are always like I can say that the situation is still like that. Okay, and since personally I haven't find I did not find anything like I would like to use newer versions, so it is fine for me. But we talk about the maintainer about doing something to upgrade to new versions of the Open API spec, but the issue is still as it is. And Flask Reset is an extension that actually needs help to like anywhere. But that's why you have initiatives like the Flask work group to help like frameworks to find people to help them, etc. Extensions, Flask extensions. So This is something like I'm. This is one of the best bets into the Flask world for me, and it is an ongoing dossier.
Okay, we have to finish. We have to move to the next
Okay.
talk. Thank you very
very
much for your interesting talk, for sharing these ideas with us, and we hope to see you in the next PyCon Sweden next year.
Thank you very much. Bye.